Hello students, today we are going to see the rest of the topics of third unit, sampling plan, sample size and sampling techniques. These three areas I am going to explain briefly to you. Before enter into discussing of these three areas, first we see what is sample. Sample is a part of a total population. Why we prefer to take part instead of taking a total population? For conducting any research, taking total population as a variable, it is very difficult to perform the study for a particular time period. So what? Not only time, it need to take more effort, more time, more resource will be waste due to taking a total population as a sample. Because of that reason, the researcher prefer to choose a sample. Taking of this small number of people as a sample, it need to represent the rest of the people in the population. In order to take this type of right sample, we have to take, that means any researcher need to follow a sampling plan, a sample size and a sampling techniques. It help a researcher to take perfect sample for conduct the study. Let me start the discussion with the first topic, sampling plan. See, sampling plan is an outline. It provides a base for conduct any type of study or research. This plan has three areas: sample unit, sample size and sampling procedure. Sample unit, it consists of categories. It means for take any example like a bank, it has different categories of customers. Customer from loan side, customer from fixed deposit side, and the customer from banking transaction side, cash transactions. These are three elements of categories of customers a bank has. Out of these three categories, any one category of customer you can take as a sample. Second element is sample size. It means number of people you are going to draw as a sample. Depend upon the research, the size will be vary. Third, sampling procedure. It includes methods. We will see it later at the end of this presentation. We will see detailing. That method also influence to decide the sample. So these three elements of a sample plan help any researcher to take sample. Next we discuss about the second topic is sample size. As I told already, sample size include number of peoples involved in the population. That means number of people those who are going to take as a sample from the population is called as sample size. This sample size are determined by so many factors that we are seeing it one by one briefly. First is nature of universe. That means the nature of the population. If the population is homogeneous, we can take less number of samples, or otherwise if it is heterogeneous, we go for take more number of sample for our study. Second, classes, number of classes in the population. That means number of groups in the population. If any population has more number of groups, a researcher need to take more number of samples, because the researcher need to take sample from each group, so the sample number will be more. If any group has less number, if any population has less number of group, the sample size will be smaller. Third, nature of the study. If the study is continuous nature, a researcher can prefer to choose a small number of respondents as a sample, or otherwise if it is general nature, they go for take more number of people as a sample. Fourth is type, sampling type. That means techniques which we are using to draw sample from the population. There are so many techniques, we will see it later at the end of this presentation. Each technique has a different each techniques required a different number of samples, so depend upon the technique, the sample size will be vary. The less sample or more sample will be decided by a technique. Its a technique also decide the sample number. Fifth one, accuracy. That means if you want any accurate result, researcher need to take more number of samples. Then only the outcome of the result will be accepted by the audience. And sixth determining factor is finance, availability of money with the researcher. It also playing vital role for deciding a sample size. If any researcher has enough money, they will spend his money to take more number of samples, or otherwise they can take only few number of samples. Apart from these three, there are some other determining factors also deciding sample size, that are nature of unit, size of the population, size of the questionnaires, quality of the researcher, conditions of the study, and availability of the time. This also playing a major role for deciding a sample size. So far we discussed about sampling plan and the sample size. Next we go to see the important element of today's discussion is sampling techniques. It may be called as a sampling method or a sampling types, all are same. So these sampling techniques are categorized into two types, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. There are two methods of sampling techniques. Probability sampling. Under probability sampling, it has four methods. Before going to discuss about these methods, I want to tell you one thing. When a researcher prefer to choose probability side and non-probability side, the reason is, if a researcher have researchers researchers having knowledge about the population, they go for choose probability sampling. Or otherwise, when a researcher don't have a knowledge about population, they go to prefer non-probability sampling method. So first we will see what are the methods are here in the probability sampling side. Simple random sampling. So first method of probability sampling technique. Here each member of the population has an equal chance of being selected as a sample, because there are 100 people, sorry, there are 1000 people in the population. Out of 1000, any number of people a researcher can take as a sample, because all units in the 1000 are having same type of characters. The second method of probability sampling is systematic sampling. It means there is some standard, or there is some formula which a researcher follows to take a sample. See here, the yellow background content. Individuals are selected at a regular interval from the sampling frame. Sampling frame is nothing, population. From the population, samples or individuals are drawn by some regular interval. That means, see here, in green shaded area, if there are 1000 peoples in the population, out of 1000 you want 100 people as a sample, you have to follow some formula, that is system, that is total population divided by number of samples required. That means total population is 1000 divided by number of samples required is 100, so you will get 10. That means every 10th person a researcher take as a sample. That means out of 1000 people, researcher take 10th person, 20th person, 30th person, 40th person as a sample. It's called systematic sampling. Stratified sampling, it means the total population will be divided into different strata. Strata means group. From each group, researcher has to draw some number of respondents as a sample, is called as stratified sample. And last one in probability sampling method is cluster sampling. Same, cluster sampling is same like stratified sampling, but in stratified, from each strata we have to take sample, but in cluster sampling the total population will be divided into clusters. For example, a total population will be divided into 4 clusters like A, B, C and D. Out of these 4 clusters, a researcher has to take any one cluster as a sample. That is, for example, if a researcher take A cluster as a sample, he left out B, C and D. He only take A cluster as a sample. It's called as cluster sampling. Next, second method of sampling is non-probability sampling. As I told already, when a researcher doesn't possess a knowledge about population, they go for preferred non-probability sampling methods. It has also 4 types: convenience sampling, quota sampling, judgment sampling and snowball sampling. In convenience sampling, it is a basic and easiest method for drawing sample from the population. Here, participants are selected based upon the availability and willingness in the research work. For example, if a researcher feel that particular people is match with his study, he can take that people as a sample for his studies. That is called convenience sampling. Quota sampling, Here, a researcher gives some categories among the populations. For example, people of a particular country, people of a nation will be divided into say, three categories like poor, middle, and upper. That means poor class people, middle class people, and upper class people. Uh, Between these three categories, we can take samples. That means we can take sample from all categories or any one categories. That is called quota sampling. For example, I give one more example for quota sampling. The class will be divided into two categories like girls and boys. From girls side you have to take 5 sample, from boys side you have to take 5 sample. That is called quota sampling. Third, judgment sampling. That means the sample, that means individuals are drawn from the population uh, based on the needs of the researcher. If a researcher feel that individuals are that samples are match with his study, the researchers will, or any researcher will take those people as a sample for their studies. It's called a judgment sampling. That is, the samples are judged by the researcher itself. If they feel they are matched with his study, they will take that people as a sample. And last one is snowball sampling. Here, when a researcher feel very hard to take out any sample for his study, a researcher prefer to choose snowball sampling. Why here snowball? The name, the name prescribed that the ball, in snowball game, the if a person roll the ball against the coin, it will touch the first coin. The first coin influence to touch the remaining coin to fall. Like that, a researcher choose first person as a sample. That first person influence to draw, or a first person influence to collect or get more number of samples is called as a snowball sample. So with these words, I conclude the today's lecture. Along with this video file, I enclosed the soft copy of this material. I inform you to go through it. The rest of the topics we will see it one by one. Thank you.